Welcome to the IDP Plus Advice Show. Today we are going to talk about, and I'm going to share with you my pre-NFL Dynasty rookie draft board. So we're going to share that, we're going to talk about it, and so let's go ahead and get started. Alrighty, welcome everyone. I am your host, as always, for the IDP Plus Advice Show, Ricky Rodrigue. You can find me on X at RickyRod66. Thrilled to be back with you today again. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to discuss my pre-NFL Dynasty Rookie Draft Board. Now, I was going to go through my process of how I get it all set up to this point, and I realized after setting it up that was going to be boring. So we decided to skip that. I'm just going to hit on a few points here related to my draft board. A couple of things that I'm going to mention first. One is I set it up in the pre-draft. Once again, this is pre-draft mode with 16 players in groups of 5, so a total of 80. Then in addition, I have usually another 20 to 30 in group 6 that I'm kind of monitoring and keeping an eye on as my process continues that starts all the way back in August. So what you're going to see when I start sharing the screen here in a little bit, it's going to be 5 groups of 16. The first group has 17. One person's mentioned twice. You'll figure out why here, or you probably already did. These rounds now, or these groups, do not equate to tiers. I don't do tiering until after the NFL draft happens. So I don't want you to assume when you see round 1 or tier 1 as it's noted on the spreadsheet, that means I have 16 people all in one tier. That is not correct. That's not how to think about it. It's the top 16 players at this point in time that as I'm watching and looking forward to the NFL draft. Now, so many scoring systems are out there, and this is offense and IDP we will be going through. For this specific one, this is not a super flex, so this is a one quarterback league. It assumes 1 point PPR. It assumes non-tight end premium. For IDP, it assumes true position. So we'll have defensive tackle, edge, linebacker, or off-ball linebacker, as some people call it, cornerback, and safety. It'll be those 5 positions. It's designed with the thought process that IDP scoring systems roughly end up with about a mix of 55 to 60 offensive players and 40 to 45 IDP/defensive players in the top 100 of a scoring system at the end of the year. So that does prop up IDPs when I'm looking at it and building out these first 5 groups of 16 each. It also assumes very deep rosters as a side note, including things like taxi squads. So that is how it's set up. Okay. So with that, let me go ahead and I'll start sharing it. And as I do start sharing it, a bit about the group overall. And when I say the group overall, meaning the draft class. The first thing I want to say is that this draft class, has a real lack of studs in it. Now, there's 32 rounds in the NFL draft. And so everybody thinks, okay, first round draft picks for 32 teams. That is true. That's what happens. But in general, there are usually not 32 first round graded players from the college ranks. Usually in a first round, there's about 15 to 18 players that have first round grades. This year, it's even lower, where it's expected, depending on who you ask, and there's many analysts and many rumors out there and so forth, that there's only about 10 to 14 that have true first round grades this year. And of course, some of those offensive linemen, which basically most fantasy football leagues don't use, so that makes that number even smaller. So we don't have a lot of top studs. Keep that in mind as we're going through this. Now, why is that the case? We have a reduction in the number of early draft declarations from college players. this little thing that's happening that's kind of taking over the college football landscape by storm, also known as NIL, name, image, and likeness. Because of those opportunities that are being created and the opportunity to get more playing time, develop their skills, play more a little bit older against younger guys and look even better, etc., more of these players are staying in college. Also, we had a period of time where players in college were granted this extra year of eligibility because of COVID, and now there's very few of those left as well that are coming out in more seasoned, more experience. So because of that, you see a big drop right now in underclassmen declaring. Now, while there's not a lot of studs, there is a decent amount of depth, I would call it. So if you're in a rebuilding dynasty situation with your team, this might be a good draft to take, quote, a lot of flyers. However, my opinion, if you're a contender, either I'm trying to trade up and figure out how to get one of these few studs that we're going to have in this class, or I'm trading out into next year's draft class, or trading for some known veterans, even some potentially of the older veterans in the early 30s, like some of the linebackers, like a Robert Spillane or something along those lines. So anyway, that's how I'm thinking and approaching this. When you look at my IDP draft board here, that once again, for those that are only listening, let me go on a quick tangent. For those that are only listening, maybe you're on Spotify, maybe you're on a walk as you're listening to this. You can go back and watch this on the IDP Plus YouTube channel, and you'll be able to see the actual draft board. Okay, and I would do my best for those in listen mode to try and help you understand some of the things I'm talking about so you aren't completely lost without seeing the draft board. Okay? Now, offense versus IDP. In my first tier, that first group of 16, I called it tier. I should have called it grouping. I have 12 and a half on offense and 3.5 on IDP. The second group, I have a little bit more IDP. I have 10 offense and 6 IDP. When you get to the third tier of 16, I'm back to having 14 on offense, 2 IDPs, with about 7 running backs in this tier. By the way, I only have 1 running back in that group 2. I keep on saying tiers, but if I'd say it, just remember it's groups, not tiers. We'll do tiers after the NFL draft. Okay, so we'll go position by position here. Now, for those viewing, once again, you can look across and from left to right and see my group 1, group 2, group 3, etc. For those that are listening, I will try and talk you through it as we go through the different groups. With quarterbacks, I have a total of 5 quarterbacks in the top 80 players, which is 16 per group times 5 groups, 80 players. Okay. Overall, I mean, for anybody that's been paying attention, you know this class is not very deep at the quarterback position. In tier 1 of those first 16, I only have 1 quarterback, and that is Cam Ward. I see that Cam Ward, or I feel that Cam Ward has the capabilities, particularly because he does have the legs, and I do anticipate he will run some in the pros, maybe not like a Kyler Murray, certainly not a Lamar Jackson, but I do think he will run and get some bonus points for us fantasy football teams with those legs. As a result, I think Cam Ward has a chance to hit kind of that top 12 group, in that 11, 12, 13 range maybe from a career perspective. So I don't have a huge outlook for him, but I could see him being a top 12 quarterback. In tier 2, I have 1 quarterback, and it's not Shedeur Sanders and it's not Jackson Dart. Both of those gentlemen are in tier 3. Excuse me, group 3. Jalen Milroe is the one that I have in group 2. He has the running capabilities and makes him a cheat code. He is absolutely a flyer, but it's no different to when Carson Wentz was the starting quarterback from the Philadelphia Eagles, and they still took Jalen Hurts in round 2 and gave him the chance to develop for a year or so, and then he became their starting quarterback and just led them to a Super Bowl championship. I'm not saying Milroe will absolutely become Hurts, but when we start talking about players 17 through 32 on the draft board, I think Milroe fits into that category with his legs being a cheat code, with his arm strength and capabilities, if someone can work with him on his footwork and help him with some of the short to intermediate passing game and give him a year to learn how to get even better through his progressions, which he's not necessarily that bad at relative to others on this list, Jalen Milroe could be a real steal, particularly when he ran this 4.44 and some actually timed him in the 4.37 range. Now, at some point down the road, does Jalen Milroe even potentially become a running back if he's struggling at the quarterback position? Not sure he's open to that, keen to that, but that's something that could potentially happen. So that's why I have him in tier 2. Shedeur Sanders and Jackson Dart are in my tier 3 at the quarterback position, which means players 33 through 48. They're in that group. Shedeur Sanders, I do believe, can be a solid NFL starting quarterback. But he doesn't have any elite traits, as I heard an analyst on TV say the other day. So I think he could be a solid middle-of-the-road quarterback, maybe a Kirk Cousins type, finishing in that 13 to 18 range, 15 to 18 range year over year. But he's not going to lead you to fantasy football heaven. So as a result, which means a championship, by the way. So as a result, I have him right now in group 3 as someone, particularly in a one quarterback league, who could end up being a starter, but not someone who I'm going to be taking too early. At least at this point in time, the NFL draft, a lot of things can change. Jackson Dart also in this tier. He does have some scrambling ability. Watched him quite a bit at Ole Miss. For those that have watched me quite a bit, can see the LSU helmet behind me. I'm an LSU fan, and part of my pre-work that I didn't want to get into all the details to up front is I do watch a good amount of college football during the NFL season because of my love for LSU and my love for college football in general. So Jackson Dart, as I was mentioning, does have some legs. He's not a Lamar Jackson or a Kyler Murray once again, but he can scramble and can get you some cheap yards and some rushing touchdowns. He gets criticized, or he gets, I don't know if criticized is the right word. He gets dinged is probably a better word because of that Ole Miss system where Lane Kiffin doesn't run a bunch of complex route trees and where he has to go through lots of progressions. But Kiffin does an incredible job of scheming people to get open. So that's great. But when Dart had some pressure situations late in games, he did struggle. I was actually at the Ole Miss LSU game where Ole Miss basically didn't score much in the second half. And LSU came from behind to win that one in overtime with Kyron Lacey catching a touchdown pass. Rest in peace, Kyron Lacey. But so anyway, I do worry about him in tight situations at this point in time. Part of that could be the need for growth. I'd be willing to invest something in this group 3 in this range of 33 to 48, as I was mentioning. The last one in this that I have from a quarterback perspective, Tyler Shuck. It's been well talked about that, and he's in group 4. It's been well talked about his injury situation, that he's had so many. As a result, he's had several red shirts. As a result, he's going on to age 26 as he's going to be drafted here into the NFL. But a lot of people think that he might be the most pro-ready quarterback of this class. Now, that's not saying a whole lot based on this class not being anything close to last year's class, at least at this point in time. Last year's class had a great first year. We'll see if those trends continue. But Tyler Shuck is supposedly the most ready. I just don't see the long-term starting capabilities for him right now, plus with his age. So that's why I have him at group 4. So not a very deep class. I know people are going to talk about, oh, they love Will Howard. You're going to hear people talk about Kyle McCord. You're going to talk about people with Dylan Gabriel. Everybody's going to have their little favorites and their pets, whatever. But these are the ones I feel comfortable drafting at this point in time. And for sleepers in this quarterback class, because I have a sleeper for every group, or at least one for every group, except for this one, I don't have any sleepers for the quarterback group. Don't think any of these others will turn into anything. If you look, okay, Rick is going to go on a tangent. If you look historically at the number of quarterbacks who have been successful outside of the first round, and particularly even outside of the top 12, the numbers outside of that top 12 or the first round are very limited percent-wise. And I wish I'd have done the research in advance to remind myself what that number is, but no, there are very few folks that have been successful in these later round draft choices. So for every Russell Wilson or Tom Brady, who are often brought up, there's a lot of Ian Books, as an example, who unfortunately just weren't that successful. My apologies to Ian Book if he happens to be watching this. Sorry, Ian, you just didn't have the success there, bud. Okay, let's move on to the running backs now. Now, the 80 players in the 5 groups, 20 of them are at the running back position. I have 5 in Tier 1. They're the 5 that you would expect to hear in Tier 1. I have 1 only in Tier 2, and I have 7 in Tier 3. Okay? So overall, this class is very deep. Now, I'm of the opinion, from a true stud perspective, there's really only 2 studs at the running back position, and that's Ashton Jeanty and Omarion Hampton. So while I have Henderson, Caleb Johnson, and Quinshon Judkins also in that group 1 for the running backs, I don't necessarily consider them studs, and I see a big drop from Hampton to down to those 3. Do I think they will be useful? Yes. Do I think they will do some fantasy football good for a couple of years? Yes, but I just do not see them on par. And I know that's not everybody's going to agree with that, but that's how I see things. The problem is because this draft it does not have a lot of studs, but it is deep, but there's not a lot of studs. These were the 3 that I felt comfortable the most pushing into that top 16 group. And because when we're talking about offensive and IDP leagues, there is still a bias in most leagues to drafting offensive players over IDPs. So that's why I bumped them up over some of maybe the edge players that we'll talk about later here in group 2. Now, I've heard it said by many draft analysts out there that they have between 25 and 26 and up to 32 running backs with draft eligible grades, which is fantastic. That says that is a deep class. However, there's 32 teams. There's 32 tailbacks. A lot of those teams have a lot of bell count running backs already. Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, as a couple of examples. So that takes that list of 32 down. So what does that mean for all this depth when you start thinking about it? It means there's going to be a lot of platooning going on. And if there's a lot of platooning, that's not good for a lot of these running backs. And it's part of the reason that I only have 1 running back currently in Tier 2 right now, and that's RJ Harvey. We'll talk about him a little bit more in a second. But I have the 7 in the group 3, and I have 4 in group 4, and I have 3 more in group 5. I have them further down because even if they're pretty talented, I think a lot of them are going to end up in platoon situations. What if Bashal Tutin gets drafted by the Washington Commanders, for example? Is Brian Robinson going to be completely out of the mix? Is Austin Eckler going to be completely out of the mix? Are they drafting Tutin for a year from now when both of those folks are free agents? Yeah, all of the above is probably going to happen. That Tutin is going to, he'll take away a few snaps like McNichols did from Robinson and Eckler, but won't see much in year 1. Robinson or Eckler or another running back, whether it be drafted or a free agent, will get signed by Washington. Tutin will be once again a platoon or a committee back in year 2. Just using that as an example. So until we see draft landing spots, I think a lot of these running backs I do have in group 3 and group 4, and we'll see how it plays out from where they're drafted and what their draft capital is and what the opportunity is with the teams that get drafted for, et cetera. So that's my thinking with the running backs in the tiers that I have. That's why I have a lot of them in tiers 3 through 5, because I think a lot of these folks are going to end up in platoon situations and not winning jobs outright. Okay. But as I talked about earlier, it is a lot of depth, and so some of these in the right situation, maybe they go to Derrick Henry and with Baltimore Ravens, and they're backing up Derrick Henry. And Derrick Henry finally, after all these years, maybe he has a breakdown, creating a great opportunity for if Cam Scatterbo ends up in Baltimore. Maybe you have that luck that happens. But that's what I think it's going to take. And so that's why when I was talking about the draft strategy for rebuilding teams, I've probably taken a bunch of shots at a bunch of these running backs in these other groups, in the groups 3 through 5, and trying to build up that depth and hope to catch that lightning in a bottle. Whereas if I'm a championship team, once again, if I can't get Ginty or Hampton, I'm looking to trade out or trade for a veteran. Okay. What else I wanted to say about running backs? I want to go back to Henderson and Johnson and Judkins. On Henderson, Travion Henderson from Ohio State, he's never truly demonstrated that he can handle a large workload without injury. Now, he is extremely exciting with the ball in his hands. Saw that during the playoffs when he caught that little swing pass and went 75 yards for a touchdown. He does have good breakaway speed. He also is good in pass blocking as well. I could actually see the Broncos liking him more than potentially Hampton. Would they grab him at 20? Not necessarily, but I could see that happening. But I don't see Henderson becoming this bell cow runner that'll get 18 to 20 carries a game with the 5 catches a game and the periodic touchdowns. I just don't see that happening. So that's why I have him lower. Caleb Johnson and Quinshon Judkins, I do have some questions about how well they see holes and so forth when I watch some of their highlights. I think they can be successful, but there's also a risk of both these guys being 2-down running backs with catching the occasional pass or pass and a half on average per game. So, 24 to 27 catches maybe a year with that 2-down, 220 carries or whatever. That's not overwhelming or exciting to me. So, relative to a Derrick Henry or a Josh Jacobs who's going to get you 280 carries, 300 carries, etc. Maybe they'll get those opportunities down the line. Maybe they'll improve the pass catching. I just don't see that happening with those two. So anyway, that's why I want to go back to those 3, even though I have them at first group. Big difference from Ginty and Hampton to those 3. All right, my sleepers in the running back group. Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt, running back, lastly from Arizona, although he only played a couple of games. Watched a little bit of his highlights, but man, when I watched the was it the East-West Shrine Bowl? Now, forget which bowl it was. My apologies. I just love the way he ran and the way he looked in that game. So he is one of my sleepers at running back. The other one is actually listed on the chart. He's coded as a wide receiver in Group 3 in green, and it's Savion Williams or Savion Williams. I'm not sure the correct pronunciation, from TCU, who, when I watched his running back highlights, it was like, holy cow. Now, he didn't take a bunch of, he didn't have a bunch of running plays. I believe it was less than 30, if I remember correctly. But in those plays that I watched, he demonstrated burst, acceleration, being able to jump cut, hit the holes quickly. I mean, he was pretty freaking amazing. I love him a lot. And so, depending on which team grabs him and where he ends up playing, and if they target him for running back, I see a huge upside for Savion Williams, so much so that I would probably put him in Group 1 if that ends up happening. So those are my sleepers for running back. For those that are just listening and can't see, right now in Group 3, I have Cam Scatterboot, Dylan Sampson, who I have big concerns about his ability to break tackles, his ball carrying, and his basically his overall strength. He does have great speed. That Tennessee offense, you have to be careful in terms of how that translates to the pros. Basher Tootin talked about fumble issues I worry about. DJ Giddens is in this group. Trevor Etienne from Georgia is in this group. Jordan James, and I'm worried I have this personal bias that he's going to become the next Bucky Irving coming out of Oregon. Probably a bad thing to do right now. I have him in Group 3. I have a feeling he might drop down from there. Damian Martinez, there's a lot to like of him out of Miami, Florida as well. He's in this Group 3, but I expect that he will, he just doesn't seem to have that true breakaway speed. He might end up being like a Brian Robinson type, okay? Group 4, in the interest of time, so I can go quickly, I have Jarquez Hunter, Devin Neal, Gordon the second, Ali Gordon the second out of Oklahoma State, and Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt, who I just talked about. And in Group 5, I have Jaden Blue, fumble issues, very light. Brashard Smith, former wide receiver, learning how to be a running back. Don't expect another Tyrone Tracy repeat. And then maybe one other person that I should have put in the sleeper range is Taj Brooks out of Texas Tech. Okay, so those are all my running backs. Okay, there's 20 of them in that group of 5 that are 80 people total. Let us now move on to wide receivers, everybody. And from a wide receiver perspective, I have 4.5 in group 1. But before we get to wide receivers more, I do need to have a read here, and that read says go to fastdraft.app, folks, with a $50 first-time deposit, and using the code PLUS, you will get a $50 deposit. That's right. You can get a 100% match up to $50 with the code PLUS. So go and take advantage of that fastdraft.app. And you know what's beautiful about this? They have IDP in FastDraft app, and it literally is fast, and you can have drafts done in about 6 minutes, basically. So it's pretty fun. It's very fun, in fact. And go and check it out. Use that promo code PLUS. Okay, back to the wide receivers. We have in total of the 80 players, 16 players, 5 groups as a reminder. I have 20 wide receivers in that grouping. Okay, 4.5 in tier 1, as I was mentioning before I did that read for fastdraft.app. Travis Hunter, I am included, and that's why I have him in the half, because I have him half wide receiver and half cornerback from an IDP perspective. Okay. Also in that group 1, I have Tatora McMillan, Luther Burden, Matthew Golden, Amika Egbuka. I didn't study all my names and pronunciations going into this, and I apologize for that, folks. Well, we'll work on that as the season progresses. But anyway, so Travis Hunter, you can make an argument for Travis Hunter to being the 1.02, so the second pick of rookie drafts in offense and IDP combined leagues. If he is a wide receiver, and if that's what he primarily plays, he is the top wide receiver in this class. And on top of that, depending on your scoring systems, you might also get some points if he plays primarily wide receiver for that occasional tackle or the occasional interception or whatever that he does on those limited snaps on defense. If he ends up playing cornerback, mostly, with some wide receiver, he's an incredible cheat code for cornerback, folks. Absolutely incredible, because you'll get the cornerback stats and layer on the wide receiver stats on top of that, which would be huge, which should put him in the number 1 range for cornerback. So you can strongly argue 1.02 Travis Hunter in combined offense and IDP leagues. If it's just an offense league, a little bit more of a risk to have him in that 1.02 slot. Even if it's Cleveland or the Giants and they say they're going to primarily play him at wide receiver, that could change over time. And if you use that high of an early pick in your rookie drafts on him and he ends up flipping a defense, and this is offense only league, you could be in trouble. So that's my Travis Hunter spiel in combined offense and IDP leagues. Strong argument for 1.02 if you hadn't thought about that. Okay. In group 2, Jaden Higgins, Trey Harris, Jalen Noel, Jack Besh, Alik Ayamanar from Stanford, and Jalen Royals from Utah State. Now, Jalen Royals is my sleeper in this class. Love his catch and run ability, except for one part of that, the catch part. He does seem to struggle with catching the ball at times. In watching some of his highlights and his plays and so forth, doesn't look like a natural catcher. It's hard to explain unless you see it. That's my one worry about him. But if he can correct that, a little bit of Deebo Samuel to his game there. I do absolutely love me some Jaden Higgins. So Jaden Higgins will probably be a second-round draft pick, big boundary X-receiver who demonstrated better speed than expected at the combine when he ran the 40. And we've seen a lot of second-round wide receivers, such as DK Metcalf, such as A.J. Brown, such as Deebo Samuel, being very successful in the pros. I think Jaden Higgins ends up falling into that boat, along with the Metcalfs and the A.J. Browns of the world. Maybe not quite that high, just to be clear, but having a very successful being a number 2 wide receiver in fantasy football. Trey Harris, I think, also has that chance. The reason I don't have him quite as high as Higgins is actually because of his injuries. Yes, he didn't run a lot of different routes at Ole Miss, back to the Lane Kiffin situation that we talked about with Ole Miss and the type of offense that he runs, and the limited route trees that Trey Harris had to run. But there's nothing saying he can't. Maybe he just hasn't had to yet. And I loved what I saw of him on the routes he did run. Another big X receiver that has huge potential. I just worry about all the injuries that he had in college. So that's why I have him a notch below Higgins. Jack Besh, if you haven't heard the story, started LSU, was behind the likes of Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas, and he actually led LSU in receiving one year before he transferred to TCU, and where he was very successful. Of course, you've probably heard of all the off the field stuff related to him, not in a bad, well, in a bad way, from not that he's done anything wrong, but losing his brother Tiger on New Year's Eve down in New Orleans. And so while that has brought him onto the radar, people think that because of that, and because he had the game-winning catch in the Senior Bowl in the last play of the game, this has overly bumped him up. I disagree. Watching him all the way back to my LSU days, and then since then, he's demonstrated the ability to separate. He has shown great hands, and so I really like me some Jack Besh. And boy, you hate to go there, but he also has a willingness to block. So you start saying, okay, is this a potential Cooper Kupp? I don't want to go quite that far, but he's got that possibility as well. In Group 3 for the wide receivers, already talked about Savion Williams. Boy, uh, he doesn't have tons of experience at the wideout position, but I do love him as a running back, as I talked about earlier. So watch where his landing spot is. Watch what they announce in terms of his draft position is. Okay. Also in Group 3, Isaiah Bond. Now, Isaiah Bond is, in quotes, out on a bond right now because he was accused of sexual harassment. And I do want to say he was accused. Of course, his lawyers sent a letter to all 32 teams where they're countersuing and saying it's all bogus, but that's bound to have an impact on his draft status. Whenever I hear some of these things during, even before they have joined the league, it makes me a little bit nervous. Last person in Group 3, Kyle Williams. Kyle Williams has demonstrated incredible speed. If you watch those Washington State highlights, and he can take a ball, whether it be a short out and run and zip and go. Once again, someone else that wasn't asked to run a lot of routes, but boy, someone who demonstrated great speed, demonstrated pretty good hands. Like me some Kyle Williams. In Group 4, Torrey Horton and Isaac Tisla of Arkansas. Now, Tisla didn't catch a lot of balls in college, but he was, when they did use him in Arkansas, he was very successful. There's another Arkansas wide receiver I liked, Andrew Armstrong, that I didn't quite bump into the top 80, but he's right below them in the people that I'm monitoring. But Tisla, I think, was criminally underutilized at Arkansas. So like him in Group 4, and Torrey Horton, liked him back to a late night Saturday night game. I was watching Colorado State. It was in the Pacific Coast time zone, so it was very late on a Saturday night. But loved what I saw from him way back when. Unfortunately, he had the injury this year. Surprisingly, ran the 40 and was able to come back for the combine, which surprised many people, and ran extremely fast, faster than people expected. So he is coming off of that injury, which even though he participated in the combine, I do worry about going into year one, but someone to monitor, keep an eye on, and maybe stash on a taxi squad. The last one's Group 5, Xavier Restrepo from Miami, Kandre Lambert-Smith, Tez Johnson. I'm sorry, I have this bias against really, really small wide receivers, and Tez Johnson fits in that category at the 5'7", 5'8" range and 160 pounds soaking wet. Some people will probably have him higher on their board because of his separation capability. And he didn't run that well at the combine either on top of that, although he did demonstrate good lateral agility, but still someone that small, that light, just can't see him being on the field that much, particularly from a blocking standpoint. just don't see the upside for him. I see more of a decent floor, not a high ceiling. That's why he's in Group 5. And then Ty Felton from Maryland. Um, in the right system, if brought along well, could do quite well, but he is all the way down in Group 5. Okay. So that is my receivers with Jalen Royals as a wide receiver sleeper, Savion Williams, or a running back sleeper, but potentially a running back / wide receiver sleeper as well. And let's go ahead and throw Isaac Tisla in there, the Arkansas wide receiver, as a sleeper as well. So more sleepers than you were expecting here at the wide receiver category. But once again, running backs, wide receivers, very deep. Okay, but which ones of these will truly break out? You got to take a bunch of shots in the dark, and hopefully you get lucky on some of these, because there's not a lot that differentiates these guys from a capabilities perspective. Let's move over to tight ends. Tight ends, I have 7 of the 80 in the 5 groups. 2 in tier 1, 2 in tier 2, 2 in tier 3, and 1 in tier 5. And I keep on calling them tiers in their groups, and I've got to quit saying that, but please bear with me. Thank you. Okay, I keep on going back and forth on Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland in this group 1 in terms of which one I have first and which one I have second. Some people think that Tyler Warren is a slam dunk no-brainer. The only thing I worry about Warren is his separation capabilities. If you watch that, now he's got these power forward type of capabilities where he can block out and box out and stuff, which certainly helps him. I don't want to say he's George Kittle, but George Kittle, is very skilled as well. But he also has that power forward block out, can control and maintain and defend off linebackers and safeties and so forth, which makes him effective. But Kittle does get a little more separation than I've seen from Warren. Loveland, I think it can get more separation, does run better routes than Warren, but will Loveland be on the field as much as Warren? Because Warren, I can see him being more on the field because he can do more inline blocking. So it's going to be interesting to see where they land. The two of them could end up flip-flopping. They'll be really close to each other, most likely, wherever they land. But that's how I see those two right now in Tier 1. In Tier 2, someone who is criminally being underweighted on in a lot of the fantasy rookie mock drafts that I'm seeing is Mason Taylor from LSU. Yes, I went to LSU. Yes, I may have a little bit of LSU bias, but this is the same Mason Taylor whose dad is in the Hall of Fame, Jason Taylor, whose uncle is Zach Thomas, the middle linebacker from the Miami Dolphins, who had a very, very successful career. So that's what his genes are tied to. Okay. He demonstrated 4.6.5, a 40-yard dash at LSU's Pro Day. Wish he would have ran that at the Combine. He also didn't do all of the other calisthenics, for lack of a better term, which we would like to have seen related to some of the shuttles and cones and all that kind of stuff. He didn't do all of those types of things. But what I did see in watching him, and I did watch a lot of him, is someone who uses natural hands, can get open, um, can make clutch catches. I go back to that Ole Miss LSU game that I alluded to earlier this past year, where he caught a couple of big catches on that game-tying drive late in the fourth quarter on 4th down. Not to mention the Alabama 2-point conversion the year before that, where he caught that from Jaden Daniels for LSU to beat Alabama in overtime the year before. So not worried about him having dropsies, not being, and it's shown that he can do the things in the clutch. So I love me some Mason Taylor in this group too. Elijah Arroyo out of Miami, Florida, is also in this group too. Some people have him much higher because they've seen the straight line speed and think he is very fast. No, that is true. He has been extremely injury prone. Unlike Taylor, who I've seen much more successful in route running, Arroyo at this point in time is more of a straight line guy versus being a truly good route runner. So I think both of them can be successful. They are a tier down from Warren and Loveland, but I do have Taylor over Arroyo. And once again, Taylor is criminally underrated right now. Harold Fannin from Bowling Green and Terrence Ferguson from Oregon are in the group 3 for tight ends. Harold Fannin put up incredible stats at Bowling Green. Absolutely incredible stats. but he also demonstrated the combine that he is not a stellar athlete. Big stats at small schools with not great athletic profiles don't get me excited, to be honest with you. So because of the stats, I probably have him higher than I should, but I don't see him anywhere close to that Taylor Arroyo grouping. I think it's a huge drop off. Terrence Ferguson from Oregon demonstrated great straight line speed once again, which is there's a correlation between tight ends who run less than a 4.69 and having some success at the pro level. There is some concern about his route running and his hands catching. So he is a little bit of a tier below. So that's where Terrence Ferguson is. And then down in tier 5, we have Gunnar Helm from the University of Texas. Ran much slower than expected, but he continued to run with a twisted ankle, which he showed a picture after the fact for those that didn't see it. He showed that on X. He posted it that he had twisted his ankle, but he still competed even with that twisted ankle. So on the one hand, A for guts, but probably a D for continuing to do that and putting up worse numbers than he's probably capable of. So Gunnar Helm for now is down in group 5. So that's all your offensive players. We're going to shift gears to the defensive side of things. But before we do, a couple of things I want to call out. First, over at idpplus.com, I've mentioned in my previous shows, best deal they've ever had. Still 50% off of every subscription package at IDP Plus. Use the promo code IDP 2025. That's IDP 2025. When May 1st hits, that sale is gone. So take advantage of that 50% now, because when it's gone, it's gone. And from what I hear, 50% is never coming back. So take advantage now and join IDP Plus. The great rankings they have, the great articles they have, the great tools that they have. Second thing I want to mention, Fantasy Football Expo. Get your 2025 Fantasy Football Expo tickets at thefantasyfootballexpo.com. There is a the in front of fantasyfootballexpo.com. It's this August. It's 8th through the 10th. It's in Canton, Ohio, the home of the Hall of Fame. There's new fan packages as well there where you can join folks such as myself, other known content creators, a lot of people, for those of you that listen to SiriusXM, you can meet the Jeff Mans of the world and Jeff Ratcliffe's of the world. And there's some great cool packages that give you the opportunity to meet some of those folks and have a chance to compete with them. So I encourage you to check that out. Some really cool stuff. If you've never been, it's also one of the friendliest groups that you can get involved with. While a lot of these folks are competing businesses, the friendship and the harmony across the folks is absolutely amazing and very welcoming of people into the community itself. So a great way to meet a lot of people. Check out the Fantasy Football Expo. It's a lot of fun. I've made the cornhole in the cornhole tournament that they do on the Friday nights. I've made the final 8. I made the quarterfinals. I may give somebody else a chance this year. There's poker tournaments, just a lot of fun, folks. So come on out and check that out. Okay, with that, now we are going to move to defense, and we're going to move to defensive tackles or / interior defensive lineman. Of my 80, for those that can see it on the screen, I have a total of 3, with 1 in group 4 and 2 in group 5. Now, this also still assumes defensive tackle scoring in your leagues make defensive tackle worthwhile and of some value. But unless you're the Chris Jones types of the world, maybe a Quentin Williams, for example, those types of folks, though, they might be in groups 1 through 3, but other than that, you're not getting up in those high groups. And group 4, I have Mason Graham as my only one in group 4. Now, I got to tell you something. He has short arms. Yes, he's not a pro wrestler, a former wrestler. Yes, he hustles like a son of a gun. Yes, he can control the line of scrimmage. Yes, he can penetrate. It had good win rate for pass rushing and pressure and so forth. So for all those reasons, yes, he is the number 1 DT / interior defensive lineman. But at the same time, he does have short arms. Now, Will Campbell, Lord knows we've heard a lot about him and his short arms at offensive tackle, but yet for some reason that's not called out nearly as much for Mason Graham at defensive tackle. It's not the reason I haven't bumped all the way to Group 4, but I just had to get on my soapbox for a little bit because of Will Campbell and LSU. Okay, almost done with that. But anyway, Mason Graham is the only one that I have here, at the defensive tackle position, second tier defensive lineman in Group 4. I have two more in Group 5, and that's Walter Nolan and Derek Harmon. And the reason I have these three above all the others is that I think they have a chance to be able to generate sacks with their penetrating presence. And sacks are one of the things that can differentiate defensive tackle / interior defensive linemen in a lot of IDP scoring systems in a lot of IDP leagues. So that's why I have these folks up here. And traditionally, nose tackles, your Tavondre Sweats, for example, from last year's draft class, are not going to they're going to push a pocket, but they're not going to get you many sacks. They might get you a couple of tackles as well, but they're going to take up two blockers, freeing up others, clogging that middle, but they're not going to get you a lot of fantasy football stats, will these nose tackle types. So that's why you don't hear me talking about Kenneth Grant. You don't hear me talk about Tyleik Williams. You don't hear me about Alfred Collins, etc. That's why you do hear me talking about Mason Graham, Walter Nolan, and Derek Harmon for the defensive tackles. The one sleeper in this group, Omar Norman Lott. That Norman Lott is hyphenated for those that haven't heard of him before. He's out of Tennessee. Rotated a decent amount, so he wasn't getting a ton of snaps, but he did have great statistics in terms of from a PFF perspective. So shout out to PFF for pass rush win rates and pass rush grades. So Omar Norman Lott would be the one sleeper that if you're in a defensive tackle required league and it's late in your draft, and if you have a taxi squad and you get it, then maybe I'm taking a chance on him if I'm pretty light at the defensive tackle position. But that's it. That's the three at defensive tackle here. Let's move to the edge position. I have 13. I probably should have called it 12 and a half in this group of the 80 players. I only have one in Group 1. I have 5 in Group 2. I have 2 in Group 3. Okay, and I have 3 in Group 4 and 1 in Group 5. Okay, let's just finish it off for those that are listening. Now, some of these ones in Group 2 and Group 3, depending on how the NFL draft shakes out, may end up going down to Groups 3 and our Group 4. Okay? And that's because I think some of the running backs and wide receivers, because of the draft capital and the teams that land, could go up from this Group 3 into the Group 2, which will push some of these folks down. Now, maybe some of these edge players end up in an incredible situation, and one or two maybe get bumped up to Group 1. Not likely to, but that could potentially happen. But we'll have to see how things play out in the NFL draft. But for right now, that's the grouping, and that's where I have the numbers. This is a good time, though, to also bring up and talk about the NFL draft. And I talked earlier about the fact that there's probably, 10 to 14 studs, including offensive linemen, or when I say studs, people that have first round grades, true first round grades on NFL draft boards for the various teams versus the 15 to 18 or 15 to 19 as they typically have in 1 year. So what that means, and particularly for the edge position, there's a huge difference in terms of success rates in the NFL draft for those picked in the top 16 versus those picked in the bottom 16 in the first round, so picks 17 through 32 of the draft. So something to keep in mind. So think about names like Peyton Turner, drafted late in the first round by the Saints. Logan Hall, drafted late in the first round, or maybe the very early second. Apologize, I should have double checked that, by Tampa Bay. Those folks have not had the kind of sacks production that we need out of these edge players. And when I say edge, okay, I'm including 4-3 defensive ends. I'm including outside linebackers, edge. All of that is one bucket right now that I'm talking about as a quick tangent, okay? But that first round, the first half of the first round to the second half of the first round, huge difference. And there's another drop to those that go into the second round. And then it really falls off from there. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now, can you strike lightning in a bottle? Absolutely. And you might get lucky and draft one of these edge players that was drafted in the late third round of the NFL draft and get lucky with him, like a Max Crosby type. And congratulations if you do. Just know the odds are pretty low in that happening. Okay, so if you get lucky, good luck with that. But we'll talk about some names who maybe will give you that kind of luck. Okay, now Abdul Carter is the one edge, as most people would have expected, in Group 1. From a draft perspective, now keep in mind there's always this heavy bias in offense and IDP leagues towards offense, but I would be willing to spend a mid first round pick in Dynasty rookie drafts on Abdul Carter because, once again, depending on league settings and where players are, but from a position perspective, but when you think about the Nick Boses, and you think about the Myles Garrett, and you think about the Micah Parsons, and you think about where they were drafted in the NFL draft, and how some of those folks are the ones that really set themselves apart. Will Anderson, another one. Abdul Carter has the opportunity to leap into that group of folks. Maybe not in year one, but he has that opportunity. Think about it. If he's drafted by the Browns, he's got Myles Garrett on the other side of him, which will certainly help. If he gets drafted by the Giants, he's got Brian Burns on the outside, and Kayvon Thibodeau could be shifted to rush over the middle as well. So they could have, although I'm not a big Kayvon Thibodeau fan, by the way, and I'd be shocked if the Giants picked up his fifth-year option as a side note as well. Okay, that was a tangent. But back to Abdul Carter. He has that opportunity. If you can get an edge player that can be, and once again, this assumes scoring where 55 to 60 of the top 100 are offensive players, 40 to 45 are defensive players. He could be a top 25 to top 30 scorer in your league, depending on scoring settings. So Abdul Carter, with those types of scoring settings, is worth a mid first round pick in rookie drafts. That's Ricky's opinion. That's what I'm running with. Okay. Group 2, Shamar Stewart, Mike Green, James Pierce Jr., Donovan Izuriku, Jalen Walker, and he was the half that I was alluding to. We'll come back to Jalen Walker. Shamar Stewart, last year, I made commentary about Chop Robinson. So we'll talk about how that applies to Shamar Stewart. Chop Robinson had an incredible combine from an athletic perspective, but when you looked at his stats at Penn State, what did you see? I made the comment he looked like Tarzan and played like Gene because he just did not have that many stats at Penn State. And I was worried about, was he going to become the Mike Mamula? If you don't know who Mike Mamula is, Google him, Mamula. Drafted, I believe it was number 9 or number 10 by the Philadelphia Eagles a long time ago because of his athletic traits. But Chop Robinson, after a very slow start to the year, finally turned it on and went through I believe it was a 6-game period where he had 5 sacks in a row once we got to the second half, into the second half of the year. Okay. So Chop Robinson, taking that back to Shamar Stewart. He had a lot of pressures in college, Shamar Stewart did, but it didn't translate to a lot of sacks. He also demonstrated a lot of hustle capabilities. Let me rephrase that. He showed constant hustling on a lot of plays. So he was willing to hustle, and he wasn't someone who was just kind of if it comes to me, great. If not, I'm not chasing him down. With that athletic profile and with the willingness to hustle and with a professional coach, and keep in mind Shamar Stewart hasn't reached the age of 22 yet. Shamar Stewart has huge potential. Even if he's drafted in the second half of the first round of the NFL draft, I still like them quite a bit, even though he's a Texas A&M Aggie. Sorry for any Aggies listening out there. Okay, he's one who could jump into Group 1. Another one that could jump into Group 1 is Mike Green out of Marshall. Why am I not putting him there right now? And I meant to color code his name orange on this. It's because of the off the field concerns that were raised and brought up, and I believe it was brought up during the NFL Combine. Sexual assault allegations were made against Mike Green in both high school and in college while he was at Virginia. And because of privacy laws situation and so forth, nothing else has come out on it, particularly because nothing has been filed against him, if I understand correctly. So while he was accused, and Mike Green publicly talked about this, it's been all allegations, no arrests, no anything along those lines. But you kind of have to worry, and you have to worry from an NFL GM perspective what that means. So it's part of the reason that even if he gets drafted fairly high, I would probably have him slightly down the board because of that risk, similar to what I talked about with Isaiah Bond earlier, in terms of you just worry about where there's smoke, there's fire, and could this be a trend? Even if it's false accusations, and it is a possibility that happened to Isaiah Bond, that happened to Mike Green, you do worry, and you got to be careful and cautious in your rookie dynasty drafts. But Mike Green's a player. Now, people talk about how he blew up the Senior Bowl. He didn't even stay the whole week, and he didn't even play in the game, folks. And yes, he did have a one particular drill where he ran over a tackle. But be sure if you hear about it, he blew up the Senior Bowl. Go back and look at what he really did at the Senior Bowl. It's not as much as people said, but he did have, what was it, 17 and a half, 18 sacks, something along those lines at Marshall in his senior year. Now, Marshall is a step down. He wasn't playing against the Georgias and the Alabamas and the Tennessees and so forth of the world and the LSUs of the world, but he was highly productive, which you would want and hope if he's playing smaller schools, and he did dominate from that regard. And he does show the bend, and he does show the speed, he does show the athleticism. So I know I talked a lot about Mike Green here, folks, but we're going to monitor. We'll see where he falls in the NFL draft. He and Stuart are two in particular that could get bumped up into the Group 1 and a higher tier overall when I do my tierings post-draft. James Pierce Jr. from Tennessee is next. Great Ben, very productive in the SEC. Now, there's rumblings, and I got to use the term rumblings, rumors, whatever you want to call it, about how he is as a teammate at Tennessee. Maybe it's a maturity thing. Once again, if you look at his age, Pierce is not 22 either as well. Okay. A lot of us made dumb mistakes and did dumb things when we weren't 22. Okay. But we were much younger. So that has probably knocked Pierce down a little bit. I do worry about Pierce in the run game and how well he does anchor on the edge, how much he's willing to anchor on the edge. He does chase things down, but in terms of stuff coming right at him, I do worry a little bit about him. And I do worry about he was so worried about rushing the passer, he wasn't really worried about stopping the run. So that's part of my concerns on him. Izuruku out of Boston College. The one thing I worry about him is his height and length. He's only 6'2" and change. And from a wing perspective, from an arm perspective, he only has 34-inch arms. He is at 82 3/4 in wingspan, so I do have to correct myself. I'm checking my notes there now. But he is on the shorter side. I don't like shorter edge players, whether it be as a 3-4 outside linebacker or, trying to play on the edge. Just don't like it. And so he was highly productive. You all may feel differently. Because of my expected draft capital, I have him in Group 2 right now, but he's someone I'm not a fan on. I probably won't have on many of my dynasty or redraft teams, to be honest with you. Now let's come to Jalen Walker. Jalen Walker is, he's perceived to be a top 10 pick in the NFL draft this year. Extremely athletic, son of a coach, demonstrated great smarts, team captain, all those kind of wonderful things about him. But there's a lot of projection in terms of what's going to happen with Jalen Walker. And his edge pass rush win rate was not that great. I called him a half earlier when I was talking about the number of people in this edge category, and I gave him that a half because depending on where he ends up, maybe he ends up playing more of that off-ball linebacker role, and he ends up blitzing more out of that with an occasional play on the edge. And if that happens, I would bump him up much more significantly in these groupings and in tiers. But right now, with this perceived edge, positional, where they're going to play him positionally, just don't feel good about him. Just really don't, folks. So if he moves into the off-ball linebacker role, if that's where he gets drafted, he jumps to Group 1. Right now, he's in that lower tier of Group 2 for me and could potentially fall even further, quite frankly. So that's my thoughts on Jalen Walker. Now, if they leave an off-ball linebacker, let's roll, baby, with him. And he moves into Group 1. Okay? Group 3, in the interest of time, because I just realized I hit the 1 hour mark, Mykel Williams and Landon Jackson. Mykel Williams, another one you could argue he'll probably drafted late first round, and he is right now seen more as a tools and traits person as opposed to a productivity person. People are going to say, well, Trayvon Walker was picked #1 overall, and Mykel Williams went to Georgia as well. And there's similarities, and there's big differences. Trayvon Walker ran much faster than Mykel Williams did. Trayvon Walker had a little bit more productivity than Mykel Williams did. Mykel Williams could end up being a 3-4 end or a 4-3 end and a nice solid run stopper. But boy, he's got a lot of work to do on the pass rush side of things. So I'm not as high on Mykel Williams as others are. I actually like Landon Jackson, who's in this same grouping, a little bit more than Mykel Williams at this point in time. From an athleticism perspective, he demonstrated very well at the combine and a little bit at his pro day as well. And I think with the right coaching, Landon Jackson has much more upside. So that's Group 3 in the edges. Group 4, and all of these in Group 4 are my quote sleepers at this edge position. We have Princely Umanamelian, and I know I butchered the last name, from Ole Miss, previously Florida. Nick Skirton, who was previously at Purdue and then went to Texas A&M, and Braden Swinson, who was previously at Texas and then transferred to LSU. Braden Swinson generated a lot of pressures, demonstrated some good speed, some incredible hustle. Love me some Braden Swinson. Nick Skirton, interestingly, he played a little bit less than 260 at Purdue, bulked all the way up to the 280s at Texas A&M, and was at that way at the combine, but then his pro day measured back in the 260 range, which I think is the right thing for him. And Prince Emmanuelian, who I know I butchered his name. Thing about him is that he was extremely productive, not as athletic, but love the athleticism and love some of the pass rush moves on him. Okay, so those are my 3 sleepers at the edge position. The last one I have in Group 5 and only one is Olu Oladejo, came over from UCLA, was playing an off-ball linebacker role at UCLA, a Mike kind of inside linebacker role. They moved him to the edge, so he first really full year playing edge, and then Carson Schlesinger moved into that inside linebacker / Mike role / off-ball linebacker role, and of course Schlesinger took off, and we'll talk about him and linebackers in a second. So those are my edges for you all to consider from a grouping perspective. Going to the off-ball linebacker position, I have only 7 of the 80 players in 5 groups. This is not a deep class at all. I have 2 of those in Group 1. You don't see anybody else in Group 4, and I have a lot of reservations even about the ones in Group 4, to be honest with you. The only reason I have the 4 in Group 2, the 4 in Group 4, and the 2 in Group 5 is because when you look across the NFL and the depth charts, there's a lot of teams with needs at the inside linebacker position, folks. There's a lot of opportunities, and that's why you see some of the Tyrell Dodsons of the world doing so well and getting playing opportunities and putting up counting stats. When I say doing well, putting up counting stats, not that they're necessarily great linebackers. Kenneth Murray is another one who Dallas traded for. Just there's a lack of depth at that linebacker position, and some of the more solid ones are getting into the late 20s, early 30s range, like Robert Spillane, who I mentioned earlier. Levante Davis could be 35. I could go on. So that's the only reason I have some of these group 4 and group 5, because I think in the right landing spot, and I want you to hear these names and know these names, they might get some opportunities because of the weaknesses of many of the depth charts in the NFL. So Jihad Campbell out of Alabama, Carson Schwarzenegger out of UCLA, those are the two in group 1 for this inside linebacker position. Okay. The thing with Campbell that we got to watch for, similar to the Jalen Walker discussion, although I've heard a lot less of it about Campbell, is that they could move him to more of an edge position. They could move him more to an outside linebacker position. If that happens, that could drop him down into a lower tier when I do my post NFL draft tiers, or a lower group, right? In terms of the groupings I have right now, drop him from group 1 to group 2. As of now, my gut tells me he ends up as an off-ball linebacker who blitzes from that position and can be very successful in that role, and belongs to be in group 1 in a high tier. And he's someone in a combined offensive IDP league that I could see drafting later in the first round, as could I see doing the same thing for Carson Schwarzenegger. Okay. So that's how I feel about those two. Campbell did have an injury to his shoulder, and if I remember correctly, he did have surgery on it. He is supposed to be ready as we get in towards training camp, but it's something to keep an eye on, and maybe he will drop a little bit as a result. But strike on him, particularly if it looks like he is going to be an off-ball linebacker, the lifeblood of IDP teams, which there's less and less of them because you have so much more nickel and dime packages. You just have a lot less of these linebackers staying on the field for 3 downs, which he has the opportunity to do. Okay, now let me talk a little bit more about Jalen Walker and Jihad Campbell with the following. Some of these hybrid players, and we've seen 2 of them recently, that kind of an inside linebacker slash edge person that haven't gone so well, and that's Zaven Collins and Isaiah Simmons. Both of them happen to be first round picks. Both of them happen to be first round picks by Arizona. So was this an Arizona issue with their coaching staff and leadership in terms of not figuring out how to use him, starting Collins in the middle and then moving him to the edge where he's been a solid pro, but not exactly getting you 10 sacks a year, not even close. I think as high as 5.5 sacks. Or Isaiah Simmons, oh, he's going to be a safety, he's going to be a slot corner, he's going to be an inside linebacker, he's going to be an edge player, blah, blah. Well, neither one have really panned out from a fantasy football perspective for IDP. And that is part of the risk, why I do call these risks with Jalen Walker and Jihad Campbell. Yes, it could have been an Arizona thing. Yes, it could have been their skill sets, but it's just something to keep in mind, particularly with Jalen Walker, who's he's 6'1", folks. He's not that huge. So, and he's 245 pounds, and he doesn't have the demonstrated stats coming off the edge. Yes, he's got a few sacks, but just be careful there. Okay, I got to get off of that soapbox for those 2. Moving on. Group 4, Danny Stutzman and Demetrius Knight, who I would call our thumpers in this class, our run stoppers in this class, in that category. So think of your Denzel Perrimans, think of your Elandon Roberts. That's what I see for those 2 right now. Then you have your Jeffrey Basses and your Chris Paul Juniors, and then have 2 folks in Group 5 that you could argue they belong with Bass and Chris Paul, and then the team that drafts them in draft capital will make a big difference. That's Smail Mundon Jr. from Georgia and Barrett Carter from Clemson. Those 4 might be grouped together. Some good athleticism, maybe on the smaller side, but maybe pound for pound aren't the best people trying to stop the run. So do they play a little bit more of that will linebacker? Oh man, I don't know. Are they mostly special teamers potentially? If I had one of these folks that I'd pick at a sleeper as all of those guys, it's probably Chris Paul Jr. out of Ole Miss. And so, but the rest of them, Stutzman and Knight, just know if you draft those folks, I think you can end up with 2 down linebackers who play anywhere, depending on the team and the scheme and so forth, 50 to 70% of the snaps on a weekly basis. That's not going to win you any IDP championships. I'd almost rather take the chance on the Basses and Chris Paul, who might be on the field more because Bass is a previous safety moved to linebacker. Carter and Munden have good speed, and Paul has decent speed as well. So maybe those guys are able to develop and stay on the field more. So that's the route I would go. And of those, Chris Paul would be the first of those last 4 for me. So that's the inside linebacker position. Moving to the cornerback spot, Travis Hunter. If you're joining in progress and you missed me talking about Travis Hunter in the wide receiver position, go back and listen to it there. The one thing I will repeat from that is that there's an argument, depending on your scoring systems, if you have IDP and offense, that Travis Hunter could be the 1.02 pick in that combination offense IDP draft behind Ashton Jeanty. Go listen to that if you missed it. Okay, in cornerbacks, I am always looking for slots. Travis Hunter being the exception. Okay, that's what I'm looking for. Before I get in the slot discussion, though, let me just mention that I have 3 players from a cornerback position out of the 80. I have that half of one in tier 1, which is Travis Hunter. I have 2 in tier 5, J.D. Barron from Texas and Jacob Parrish. Those are the 2. That is it. So going back to the slot discussion, slot cornerbacks that are on the field for a significant amount of snaps, 80, 85, 90%, are your best chance for scoring from an IDP perspective. They have the chance to get tackles for loss. They have a better chance for getting tackles. They have a better chance for blitzing. They have a better chance for sacks because they're playing so much closer to the line of scrimmage oftentimes. There's more, and they're closer to the inside as well. So that's who I'm looking for, okay? And I'm also looking for people that have shown the ability to catch the ball, i.e., they made plays happen, they made things happen with interceptions, which Barron and Parrish, that applies to both of those two. I usually don't have a ton of cornerbacks. Last year, I called out Cooper DeJean, and you saw what he did for Philadelphia, and I hope you drafted him and took my advice. I didn't do a video on it, but I did a written article about it. You can go back and check that out as a side note. But he was one of the few that I was targeting along with Mike Sanderstill, even though Mike Sanderstill didn't play in the slot very much for Washington. He played on the outside quite a bit. We got lucky from that regard with him. I'm not expecting a repeat for him unless he gets moved to the slot. There's just a low repeat rate at the cornerback position. But so those are the ones I'd be targeting. Now with Barron, there is a risk, even though he's small, there's a lot of talk that depending on where he goes, he'll still play on the outside. So we got to monitor that very carefully. Look at the Miami Dolphins. If he happens to get drafted there, and if they trade Jalen Ramsey, they already released Fuller, they might be forced to put him on the outside. And if that happens, he won't get the counting stats for IDP that we need. So we're going to have to watch that very, very carefully. So that is cornerbacks. I usually have just 2 or 3 that I'm kind of watching. In this case, 2.5 with including Travis Hunter. From a sleeper perspective, I have Quincy Riley from Louisville and Caleb Ransaw from Tulane. Those are the other 2 potential slot cornerbacks I have that we'll keep an eye on to where they're drafted, the depth charts, the opportunity to play in the slot. The last thing I'll talk about the slot, and this is kind of getting ahead towards the season, is if a team, if JD Barron's on defense, and let's say he's playing he's playing on a team where he might be using the slot, like the New Orleans Saints last year, like they did with Ugo Amadi. Let's say that happens, okay? But they're playing a team that plays with a lot of 21 personnel, like the Raiders, with 2 tight ends and 1 running back on the field, and they have Michael Mayer and Brock Bowers on the field at the same time, which means the cornerback comes off the field a lot. That slot cornerback is not going to score a lot of points that week. So it's not only having the slot cornerbacks, it's knowing when to play them because of when they're going to get enough time on the field in a particular game. So sorry for that tangent, but for those that might be a little bit newer to IDP, I wanted to kind of throw that in there. So that's the wrap up of cornerbacks. Now let's move to safeties. For safeties, I only have 3 in the group of 80. And for those that are looking on the screen, they're going to see 1 in group 2, and that's Nick Imanowari from South Carolina. You're going to see Kevin Winston Jr. from Penn State in group 4 and Xavier Watts from Notre Dame in group 5. There's 1 name missing, and that is Malachi Starks. Similar to the slot cornerbacks we're talking about, we want safeties that are going to have a chance to maybe guard in the slot. We're going to want safeties who play that third linebacker role when they're in that nickel package, but comes up more to line of scrimmage to create more tackle opportunities. I think the three that I mentioned in Monowari from South Carolina in particular have that and have the opportunity to also blitz the quarterback and get the sacks as well, and other tackle for losses on run blitzes, things along those lines. Kevin Winston Jr. from Penn State had a knee injury this year, but I think he has the capability as well based on what I've seen. Xavier Watts from Notre Dame, same thing and all, even though Watts did play a little bit deeper as well. But I think those guys have more of a capability to be used in that nickel package where they're closer to the line of scrimmage and can generate safety in a regular package, nickel another package where they get used closer to the line. Malachi Starks is not on my list right now because I think Malachi Starks, from a fantasy football perspective, won't be that great because I think he'll be used as more of a deep safety, whether it be single high or two deep. And I just don't think he will accumulate the types of stats that we need from a fantasy football perspective. Let's see where he gets drafted. Let's see what the depth chart looks like. Let's see what the kind of defensive scheme they use. But for now, Malachi Starks doesn't even make my top 80 right now from a rookie draft perspective. Okay. My sleeper, Jonas Sanker out of Virginia. He is my sleeper for the safety position, who could be similar to Winston Jr. and a Watts in particular. Woof! Hour and 15 minutes so far. Not bad, but hopefully you got some great information to work from for your Dynasty rookie drafts. And as you're starting to think about it, maybe start building your own draft board, introduction to a lot of players so when the NFL draft is happening, you have more knowledge of them going into it. So hopefully this was helpful for you. So speaking of the NFL draft, and I mentioned it earlier, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these 80 and we're going to look at the draft capital. We're going to look at the expected team narrative, which, by the way, that means if it's a wide receiver and he gets sent to a team that has maybe Mason Rudolph as their starting quarterback, and you expect their offense to really struggle again as a result, that maybe we don't put him as high on our draft board. So that's number two. Number three, the scheme they're falling into, such as the single high or two deep safeties that I alluded to earlier. We're also going to look at the opportunity, the depth chart for snaps and playing time. We're going to see if that team might be a consideration for picking up other free agents at a certain position, or maybe making a trade at a certain position, depending on how competitive they might be with that one free agent addition. And we're going to do all of that, take all that into consideration, and we're going to build out our tiers for our rookie drafts, our post NFL rookie draft tiers. And you know what? We're going to do a show on that after the draft. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that and watch that before you get into your rookie draft. I might even, time permitting, I might even write an article on that as well. It may be behind the IDP Plus paywall, but if you use that promo code of IDP 2025 and get 50% off any of the subscriptions, you'll be able to read it from that regard. Okay? So that'll be one of the shows I do. I may even do a mock draft or two. And then after that, Sean Teague at Sean8386, for those that followed me and joined the start sit shows we do on Sunday mornings to help with the start sit decisions that you had, both offense and IDP. Sean will be joining me for a post NFL draft veteran winners and losers. Okay. For if you haven't seen my post free agency IDP winners and losers at the different positions on the defensive line and linebackers and defensive backs, you can go back and watch that on YouTube on the IDP Plus channel, or you can listen to it, on Spotify. Go check those out. Those are pretty interesting. Well, we're going to do a modified version of that. Sean and I will do that post the NFL draft. We're also going to have a couple of shows related to who's going to ascend into the top 24 at each of the various positions, and who's going to descend out of the top 24. We're going to do one for IDP, and we're going to do one for offense. So get ready for those shows with Sean T, who I love. Great sense of humor, great advice that he gives out on the IDP offense and IDP Plus start sit show that we do. along with Michael Sicoli as well. Encourage you all to listen to those shows when the season comes and join us, okay? Now, if you like this show, please give us a thumbs up on YouTube. I'd really appreciate that. If you have comments, questions, suggestions, add them on the YouTube channel, and I'll go ahead and try and respond to all of them. Give me a follow at Ricky Rod 66 on X as well. And a couple quick reminders. fastdraft.app, $50 off with the $50 match with the code plus. Up to $50 you can get a match. Just use that code and take advantage of the new fastdraft.app which also has IDP players. IDPplus.com, just talked about it. ITP 2025 code, 50% off of any subscription. Fantasy Football Expo, check it out. Go to the Fantasy Football Expo. Come meet us out there. I'd love to meet so many of y'all, okay? And lastly, with that, we will see you in about another week or so. This is Ricky Roderick wishing you, your family, and your friends great health and happiness. Be kind to one another. And I'm out of here, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.